Human swordsman Gate is supposed to be a legendary chosen hero, but he's currently getting bullied by his own commanders in a desperately losing war. The Federation is getting stomped by demons, with millions dead, and the enemy pushing their final stronghold at Jiokun Mountain. This mountain is basically the spawn point for 10 legendary Deca weapons, and pulling one from the rock makes you a transcendent. Prophecy says once 10 of these OP heroes group up, they can finally speedrun the Black Dragon Demon Lord and end this century-long nightmare. But the military is a toxic mess, with knights literally slapping guards and banning them from water and sleep just for fumbling minor protocol about the transcendence. Gate wakes up and immediately stresses with an elf archer named Scully about the higher-ups raging over a botched watch shift handled by a gnome mage named Morris. Scully reminds Gate to heavily scope out today's recruits in case the prophecy drops a new transcendent in their laps. Right now, Gate and Morris are the only two people who have actually pulled these weapons. Despite this legendary status, Gate is stuck evaluating the black magic rookies under Uldring, a high-rank dark elf who blatantly disrespects him. Gate yells the zombified recruits into formation, spotting a slow girl, a guy with intense murder eyes, and a rich dark elf kid dripping in chrome rings. He drops the bomb that he's a transcendent leading their final dungeon raid, leaving the rookies absolutely stunned. Nearby, Morris is sighing over the rich kid's uniform before Uldring marches the rookies away. Gate goes to check on the gnome, but out of nowhere, a high-rank knight named Jaga kicks Morris to the dirt and steps on his head just for ruining his sleep. Gate tries to intervene, pointing out he's killing the guy, but Jaga just laughs, slaps the gnome again, and threatens to put another scar on Gate's face if he talks back. Outranked and entirely humiliated, our so-called hero just bites his tongue and stays quiet. The scripture recorded an imprecise prophecy, slowly forgotten during far too long a wait. They were stunned to have pulled a Deca weapon. That's right, our hero Gate and the gnome Morris. The soldiers wondered if that so-called scripture was just folklore. The balance of this brutal war, all of it, was only maintained because of the hierarchy. With so many different species involved, order needed to be even stricter. The illusion called Transcendent was a name given to the fear of there being no one at the top. And now, we return to the moment when Jagus was asking if Gate was covering for Morris just because he was a Transcendent. Finally, he asks that intimidating question about carving a scar into his face. Gate stays quiet, saying nothing. The two of them stand there, staring at each other, creating a terrible atmosphere. Suddenly, Scully calls out to Jaga. He turns to her without saying anything, then asks what she wants. She explains the officer was calling all the Night Division members over, since the supply spear count was wrong. Jagas has no reaction, remembering the moment he was admiring a beautiful spear at the supply depot. So, he turns quickly, leaving Gate and Morris behind, since he had more important things to deal with. After that, he shoves Scully, telling her to get out of the way. Following all that commotion, Gate explains to her that Jagas's trash usually gets handed to him easily, but his trashy instincts have been getting worse. He asks if Morris is okay. The gnome answers he cast a defense buff so he could handle it. Scully tells Gate she thinks Jagas was doing that to be seen among the recruits, hoping to pick up some scraps of attention. Gate mulls over her words, remembering that guy. Turning to Morris, he explains that Jagas has an insane inferiority complex, meaning it would be better for him to watch himself, and that he didn't need to apologize. Then, Gate asks why he poops so often. Morris explains it's a species issue with the intestines. Since gnomes have smaller bodies, their metabolism is faster, and on top of that, their intestines are thinner. A while later, Gate asks if Moai caught Scully sleeping, and if there's not a single normal person in this unit. However, he changes the subject, telling the two of them to clean up and get inside, since he needs to check on the recruits. The scene shifts to the barracks, where the scary-eyed one, recruit number 29, Xenia, was staring at the other recruit in the corner. It was Swan, recruit number 7. Xenia wondered what was up with that weird girl, and why she had been staring at him since early morning. This continues until Uldring arrives at the barracks. Swan studies him, stating he looks exactly like that guy who hit on her at the club. We are then taken to the entrance of the Redonia Club in the Eva district. Inside, Swan was talking with her friend about some guy named Beth, who broke up with someone because his ex cheated on him with a dwarf. Suddenly, Uldring shows up and introduces himself. He says there are two of them too, asking if they would like to hang out together. Swan apologizes, saying they are in the middle of a deep conversation right now. Uldring walks off, saying maybe they will change their minds and they'll come back again in about 5 minutes. As they walked away, her friend asked why she had done that. The two of them keep talking, and Swan explains she doesn't like skinny guys with sharp eyes. Back in the present, she sighs, saying those were good times. Uldring announces that before training starts tomorrow, there will be a briefing on tetanus vaccines. Swan wonders about the tetanus, questioning if they really had to get tetanus shots since there weren't any healers around here. Oldring walks off, telling them to maintain discipline, and then he leaves. The barracks fall into extreme silence, which Swan finds incredibly awkward. Suddenly, a woman calls Oldring a bastard, saying he had the face of a veteran with all that swagger. One of the recruits tells her to shut up and sit properly. She shouts, asking if she knows him, and he calls her over, calling her a dumbass. Swan sighs, wondering what these bastards were even doing. Then, Gate appears at the barracks door. Everyone looks at him, stunned, since a transcendent had arrived. Swan swallows nervously. Suddenly, the slacker recruit Narts lets out a loud sigh. Swan wonders what is up with this guy. After all, he was a piece of trash in every way. Gate asks why there have been so many uniform changes today, and all from just one guy. Narts stands up, saying it was him. He explains his family told him to avoid earthy tones and stick close to sky blue, giving a light sniff after saying that. Gate tells him to stop sniffling nonsense, get dressed already, and sit down. In the back, behind Narts, someone was holding back laughter. Gate asks what he was doing and if he wasn't going to sit down. Narts whispers quietly, telling him not to try it, and then suddenly explodes, shouting at him not to try to make him look crazy. Gate turns completely serious, and everyone in the barracks goes silent. They were stunned, wondering what the hell that lunatic had just said. Swan was also speechless. Gate orders everyone to the floor, and everyone gets into a push-up position. Finally, he explains he'll let it slide for today, but if anyone pulls trash like that again, they will get a real taste of hell. Everyone shouts in unison, agreeing with him. Narts was groaning the whole time, his face sweating like an actual pig. Moving to the next day, Scully was vaccinating the recruits. In the background, Morris asks Gate if everyone really needed to get this. Gate asks if he knows why Drenane, the elf healer, uses a mechanical leg, and Morris says no. Gate explains that during battle, she got hit by a nail-studded club and patched up the wound however she could. He notes the number of people who die in battle isn't that different from those who die of tetanus, and Morris agrees that's terrifying. Even Archmage Vilcross announced new healing spell updates, but he's never beaten tetanus. Suddenly, Gate notices something in the background. He turns, wondering why it is so loud. Scully calls out to him, desperately explaining that recruit number 13 has vanished. Gate has no reaction to this at first, until he remembers that number 13 is that damn pig. Our hero asks who escorted him, and Scully says it was Jaga. When she had complained about the delayed schedule, he intimidated her, telling her to shut up. Right then, Gate turns and asks if anyone saw the damn pig. Xenia introduces himself, raising his hands right behind Swan. Gate asks if he saw him, and he answers that he just did. His eyes gleamed as he pointed, saying he was heading toward the mountain out back. The three of them turn to search for the back mountain until Gate realizes that is the Deka Weapons Hill. Meanwhile, Narts was up there, calling himself the Chosen One. He looks at the sky, repeating the names Deka Weapons Hill and Jeoken Mountain Pass. He states the black magic Deka weapon, the Black Dew staff, was prepared for him. He remembers Gate telling him to stop talking nonsense, along with the mockery of those inferior bastards riding along with it. But now was the time to show them. He was going to shut all those inferior bastards up. After all, how dare they look at him with those eyes? Suddenly he turns as someone shouts, "Don't do that!" Narts sees Gate and Morris running toward him. Gate shouts, warning that if he touches that thing right now, his arm could go straight to hell. Narts tells them not to move, or he'll touch it right now, leaving the two of them stopping nervously. The pig says Gate's clever scheme of restricting people's clothes and applying psychological pressure doesn't work on him. Gate asks what nonsense he is talking about. Narts tells them to be more honest. They were scared of a new transcendent showing up, especially the heir of the Beckenberg family. Gate shouts, saying he has the lowest score among all of them and should forget about being a transcendent. His athletic ability and power are goblin tree level. Even if he were judged a transcendent, he couldn't pull a weapon like this without a warm-up process. Narts asks if they are judging him by the same standards as ordinary people. Exceptional individuals are destined to face rejection, but even so, they must lead ignorant fools like Gate. Extending his hand, he says, today, he is going to pull this Deka weapon and accept the destiny given to him. Gate shouts, telling him not to do it. As Narts extends his hand, something starts glowing, and suddenly, he is flung upward with tremendous force. He crashes down onto his back on the ground, and Morris and Gate run over to him. Narts was worse than a pig ready for slaughter, drooling on the ground. Morris is even confused, wondering if he was an orc or an elf. Gate shouts, saying there is no time for this, and tells them to get down the mountain first. Meanwhile, Oldring was explaining that black magic is almost like a curse. Among them, the crown jewel of black magic debuff buffs, the devouring fog resistance training, will be conducted today. Swan felt more relieved since that lunatic wasn't around. Oldring starts swinging his staff, saying, "Bunsist imount," and tells everyone they needed to put their bandanas over their faces. Swan wondered what reason they would ever have to get hit by black magic. Suddenly, Oldring shouts, telling everyone to take off their masks. Swan removes hers with a bad feeling, stating not even during the Allied Kingdoms era did they do this kind of barbaric training. Meanwhile, the other recruits were suffocating. Even the scary-eyed one shows up desperate, nearly unconscious with his eyes rolled back white, but Oldring cuts in and puts him in a sleeper hold. Swan hears the order to start the military anthem, immediately snapping back to attention and singing. Exhausted, she calls Oldring a bastard. Looking at this situation, there are tons of beatings and nonsense, with no special treatment for transcendence whatsoever. She wonders if she can put up with that crazy bastard's whims. But with this much money and honor at stake, she knows she really does have to endure it. She figures the system is really shoddy, thrown together in a rush during the war. Oldring orders the front row to exit the cave while maintaining formation. Outside, he says after a 5-minute break, they will go back for the next round. Swan states it is just about doing enough to survive, saving up money, and getting discharged. She closes her eyes, saying in the end, it is just about not dying, and living to see 500 years old. Suddenly, Oldring spots Morris and Gate. Swan gets confused seeing them too, looking at Narts on Gate's back and calling him a pig. He had finally been caught. Oldring asks why he is in that state. Scully cuts in, saying there are no healers anywhere in the entire unit. Gate turns and asks if Morris can do something since he is a buffer, but Morris explains that healing and buffing are completely different concepts. Oldring asks why Gate was looking at him. After all, what could he possibly do with a guy who's dying? He then tells Scully to double check. Swan raises her hand, introducing herself, and says she thinks she can handle this with black magic. Gate is speechless, and Oldring is surprised. Swan explains that looking at it, a cursed creature is latched onto him so it looks like a debuff. Looking closer, she notes it looks like a dentacula, explaining that it is a magical form, but basically a creature, and it should be possible to weaken it. Oldring tells her to stop talking nonsense and wait for the healers. Gate cuts in, shouting that makes sense, and it would be better for her to try first. Oldring tries to argue, but Gate counters that they have nothing to lose, and if it doesn't work, they will just wait for the healers. Swan asks if she can borrow Oldring's staff first. Taking it, she stands in front of Narts and starts channeling energy, chanting, Ater Takoyani. Finally, she finishes with Kokusinte's Paloren, forming a purple shield. Narts starts levitating and coughing. The creature on his arm starts dissolving, and Swan says it is done. The creature's shadow starts flying through the air, and Narts begins snoring like a pig on the ground. Gate and Oldring are stunned. Swan wipes her forehead in relief. The two of them look at her, both thinking to themselves at the same time that she is useful. The scene shifts to a view of a mountain behind a wall. Closer up, a creature guards fragments of Swan, Gate, and Oldring amid skulls. After that, a carriage arrives at the fortress. Scully notes the military police have arrived, then asks Gate what happens to him now. Gate explains they are going to give Narts a medical discharge, and she remarks that the guy really thought he was a Class A transcendent. Suddenly, Morris appears, calling out to our hero, and says Gate has been summoned to the officer's room, along with himself. Gate is confused. You and me together? Why? We are taken to the officer's room. Gate wonders what happened, and worst of all, why the mood was like this. Jaga speaks with his back turned, saying Private Narts is a model example for the other recruits, which triggered feelings of inferiority and a sense of crisis among the unprepared transcendents. He claims ordering the extraction of a Deca weapon was behavior meant to relieve that anxiety. Gate slowly asks what he is trying to say. Jagas explains that unfortunately, Gate and Morris are immature, and it is all his fault. Gate studies Jaga, who is covered in new rings and chains, as he says he is going to severely discipline both soldiers. Gate grits his teeth, muttering to himself that Jagas is a damn asshole. Morris shouts, saying they didn't do anything, but Moai cuts him off, telling him to shut up. In the background, someone else starts speaking. It was Rebecca, commander of the 3rd Company, saying she was disappointed in them. If he did something wrong, all he had to do was admit it and reflect from now on. Morris shouts, saying this didn't make any sense, but Gate cuts him off, apologizing and saying he was still adjusting to the unit. He looks over, stating it was him who gave the order and acted recklessly. Rebecca says she is not scolding them for their actions. Actually, she was scolding them because they wouldn't admit their mistake. One of the soldiers points out that even if they admit it, they can't just let it slide. Rebecca excuses herself and asks them to wait a moment. She approaches the guard, saying she won't let it slide, and asks if he knows they are transcendents. Getting even closer, she says she didn't want to ask this, but asks what his rank is and if he wants to die. Then, she taps his shoulder saying she was just kidding. Finally, the guard says he will be heading out and asks her to send over the details of the appropriate punishment. Moai notes that even so, today was resolved without major problems. Rebecca wonders if she looks happy about it, then tells Moai to meet her separately later. Jagas walks past Gate, whispering to him that the two of them are lucky. However, Gate was staring at the punishment record. Morris tells him this is absurd, but Gate tells him to get used to it, since it is common. The scene shifts to Swan in the middle of the rain, handing over the magic device, then crawling under barbed wire, marching while shouting, and finally using staffs to cast spells on training dummies. She states these 5 weeks have flown by. After getting more used to the atmosphere, it was so boring she wondered if this was even right. She was calm, since the other guys were mostly doing fine too, but there was one thing she couldn't get used to, that damn cursed pig. Goodwill turns into disaster, and she thinks she should have just let him die back there. Suddenly Jaga appears, announcing he is going to post the midterm evaluation record for them to check. Swan approaches, confused, wondering what the hell this was and why Narts, that rejected pig, was scoring so high. She then sees Jagas asking Narts if anything is uncomfortable, to which he answers that Jagas's armor looks nice. Swan realizes Jagas was trying not to make it obvious that he was sucking up to that fat guy. She wonders if he is planning to push that guy until he becomes a transcendent. The scene shifts to the regular soldiers' barracks. Morris asks Gate if this scoreboard isn't a problem, and Gate answers that it was Jagas who stuffed points in for Narts. The gnome asks if the scores still even matter. After all, if he is an elf, he will go as Uldring's assistant gunner, and he doesn't think Uldring will stay quiet about that. He asks if Gate isn't pissed off, to which he answers there is nothing to be pissed about, since Jaga is human. Morris says that is impressive, noting that Jagas being high rank in that state makes him disgusted just to look at. The scene returns to Narts telling Jagas he is thirsty. Swan and Xenia were responsible for the water duty. While carrying the jug, Swan wondered why it was so heavy even empty. She asks the scary-eyed one if they could rest a bit, and he agrees. She asks why these portraits were there, and Xenia answers they are portraits of heroes from each front. She looks at one of them and comments to Xenia about how his face could make demons flee in fear, until she turns to Xenia, and he answers that this is his father. Swan, nervous, answers that looking again, he is beautifully masculine with sharp eyes. She asks why he came here since his father was a 3-star general, and he says it's natural to dedicate yourself to your parents. Swan mulls it over, wondering why there were so many invasive species like that pig. She looks at Xenia and couldn't even tell what he was thinking. What Xenia was actually thinking about was where on the cup he should put his mouth to drink the water. Suddenly the jug hits the ground. The two of them had arrived and start talking about the assignments. Since Xenia was in second place, Swan asks if his consultation wasn't next. She realizes they called Narts first because of some issue. The scene shifts to the barracks where everyone was gathered. Scully was trying to convince herself that recruit number 13 had high scores. She states to herself that this guy is some kind of cross-dressing fetishist who always picks whatever is available whenever there's a choice. Suddenly, Narts announces he has decided, after much deliberation. Jaga smiles, saying whatever it is, it will fall under that damn Uldring. However, Narts says he is going to stay right here, in the Interspecies Federation Central Brigade, so he is applying for the knight position. Everyone's jaws drop. Jaga, meanwhile, is completely lost, until he realizes it and starts breaking out in a cold sweat. Moai cuts in, telling Jaga this is an excellent choice. He pats Narts on the shoulder and says he made a brave choice. Morris turns and asks Gate what the hell that was about, until he notices something odd. Gate had a faint smile on his face. The scene shifts to Gate, saying recruit number 13 is going to Barracks 3. Finally, he tells Morris to watch since he is going to find out. Gate figures that bastard Jagas got in touch with Narts' parents, and they had shoved it so far down his throat he couldn't spit it back out. He had boasted to the officers with his own mouth that he is Class A, so there is absolutely no way he can back out now. That damn number 13 is clearly starving for attention. Obviously, he is going to gravitate toward the one person who actually gave him attention. Cut to Gate telling Narts that a knight's uniform would suit him well, since he has a cold tone about him. Morris looks at Gate, realizing that is what he meant during the gear-fetching run, dispatching the rejected torturer officer. In other words, this is Jaga's own contradiction project backfiring on him. A few minutes earlier in a cabin, someone questions number 13, Narts. It was an elf, and she didn't believe what she was reading, that the boy was an honor student. She looked without understanding at the knight showing off, thinking he was a big deal. At that moment, the pieces began to fit together in her head, and everything started to make sense. He realizes the boy's trickery and is afraid of being replaced as an assistant. Oldring and then his colleague end up in a relaxed situation. The elf is indignant, while Jaga tells him to just accept it and obey the chain of command. He realizes he will end up being replaced this way. Sometime later, back to the present in the brigade, the fat elf intended to apply for the knight position. The scene cuts to the high-ranking knight of the 3rd Company, Oldring, talking to the high-ranking black mage of the 3rd Company. Then, we see an old man questioning the mage and the knight about the immediate approval of Nartz, the out-of-shape elf. The mage, in a mocking tone, throws all the blame on his knight friend, who does not look good at all. The mage takes the opportunity to poke his friend even more. Soon after, we see the old man smiling and agreeing with all that. The knight is indignant and cannot believe the hasty choice made by the old man. Meanwhile, the mage was getting into our knight's head about the bribery and grade frauds he had committed, so he should accept the orders. The knight was pissed off with all of Oldring's provocations, but couldn't say anything. Our knight didn't know that it was all nothing more than a trap set by Gate. Meanwhile, Gate remembered how much he was humiliated by Joga. The real demon there was Gate. One night, the cute leopard sees a large battalion passing by. Then, the blonde elf with pointy ears cannot understand the weird stone on the path. We see her keep that strange boulder as a souvenir, while her friend watches. Gate leads the way, bossing around and saying he will tear a new one into whoever can't handle the march. The gray-haired elf was sweating. She was already exhausted and couldn't take the training anymore. The march continued to the sound of singing. Soon we see our warriors arriving at their destination. Everyone signs the necessary enlistment documents. Finally, it is time for the Deka weapon extraction ceremony. Our boy was answering some questions from a recruit, who commented that if the prophecy is right, it will end at the 10th second. We then see a pale-winged elf observing everything. Soon, everyone is apprehensive about the final extraction ceremony. The boy begins the roll call and instructs everyone to take a step forward when called. In the first group, there were already 2 candidates. Soon, Recruit 29 Xenia and Recruit 7 Swan were called. We then see the 2 recruits warming up. The slicked-back hair elf shouts that Xenia will try the extraction first. Recruit 29 licks her lips, imagining a way to achieve transcendent glory. We then see the legendary Deka weapon, which cannot be drawn by normal means. The buff elf, with her muscles, heads towards the legendary weapon. The archer is indignant with the recruit's shape and all that definition, and the boy says her strategy is to draw the legendary weapon with brute force. The other elf recruit is in shock, thinking this must be pure genetics. Then, the buff elf, farming Aura, tries to draw the weapon. She exerts a terrible force and makes macabre grimaces, but she fails miserably. Unsuccessful, she asks for a pickaxe and a shovel, and they ask her to come down from there. Then, recruit number 7 is soon called. Everyone stares at her. The winged elf with slicked back hair shouts that the worthy one must draw the transcendence weapon in the name of the scriptures. Our recruit stands before the legendary weapon. She grabs it with both hands, while the boy and the shorty watch closely. The recruit, taking a breath, pulls with all her might, but is saddened by the situation, because the weapon didn't move a bit. The crowd murmurs that not even the infamous Eagle Eye succeeded. Our recruit girl is sad with the result, thinking it was a miscalculation, and remembers a memory from the past. But she doesn't give up, feels some vibration, and ends up realizing that her hand won't let go of the weapon. Suddenly, an aura of absurd power appears out of nowhere around her. She doesn't understand shit, and the crowd even less. But the boy and the shorty are aware of what is happening, because she found the Lord of the Peak, Gyokun. Disappointed, the Lord of the Peak calls her weak, a piece of shit compared to the previous wielder. The creature continues by saying that she is dull and doesn't have a sliver of ambition. He talks about her wasting time reading cliché romance novels. The girl is in shock, seeing that the Peak is digging up all her shameful past, but then she ends up accepting all of it and her flaws. Gyokun ends up accepting it and grants her the Black Dew. The creature ends up confessing that the elf is more preferable than the other recruits, the Stinky Pig, or Eagle Eye. Then the Lord talks about the effects of the corrupting nature of the weapon, but for her it won't be a problem at all, because if it were up to her, she would stay home reading romance novels so she can be trusted. The elf girl was already starting to get annoyed. The Lord leaves the Black Dew in the elf's care. Swan questions the Lord's attitude in putting faith in her, saying that her romance books are not mass-produced and that it is just literature. Soon the elf raises the legendary weapon. Everyone is amazed by what is happening and doesn't understand the words she speaks. Our girl then realizes that she has returned to the real world, and her companions begin to applaud. She stands there, looking at the weapon without understanding. Now our elf managed to pull the black dew. We see her relieved, as Swan, a transcendent black mage, was confirmed. Then, in a cut under the trees, the appearance of a female transcendent ended up scratching some women where it hurts most. The two strangers are not very happy and talk about seniority, salary, and contempt. Returning to the extraction point, the buff elf and her companions applaud Swan's success. Suddenly, something disturbs the poisoned elf. She looks and sees from afar something that is happening. The buff elf feels a very sinister aura, and on the hill some creatures appear. The weird little boulder was nothing more, nothing less than a demon's eyeball that is part of its evolution. We see the end of the ceremony. The elf girl had a very good feeling of accomplishment when suddenly the buff elf spoke in her ear. The monster elf didn't want to ruin the ceremony's mood, but she had spotted creatures on the mountain, so she asks to deliver something to Gate. It was a weird boulder with spikes. The large elf raises her arms, gives an affectionate hug to her companion, and they say goodbye. In a sad atmosphere, everyone says goodbye to their teammates. The blonde elf talks about how the new recruits are soft. The faltering shorty didn't understand the joke made by his companion. Swan runs to put on her new battle outfit. Looking at her weapon, she swears she will not separate from it. The grumpy shorty soon came to call our girl. He hands her a book with rules and filler, and the pygmy walks away, asking her not to separate from the weapon. The elf was reading the book attentively when suddenly she heard something. We see Gate doing his training, and our girl remembers the weird stone she has to deliver to him. Soon we see the dark elf elaborating his plan. Oldring walks far from the tent because he sees the knight and the immense elf arguing. The dark elf was all happy when suddenly he hears a voice calling. They were two veterans who were about to be promoted in the official ranking. Jaira, a healer, and her partner Asen, a narrow-minded muscle man. The elf realized that he was nothing but a piece of poop in front of those two. They question him about why the dark elf was jumping for joy and ask the elf to bring his assistant to them. The dark elf does not understand that request because she was just a rookie. The healer then just plays dumb. The muscle man ends up making the dark elf a punching bag. Seeing that the situation was getting ugly, he just ends up agreeing with that. In the room, our girl receives a visit from the black mage. We see the dark elf smoking his cheap cigarette. Swan stares at him and sees what a fool he is, destroying his lungs. Then the dark elf talks about the call from his superiors. He was a real punching bag for the higher rankings, and our girl listens to the advice of her veteran. We see Gate researching the spiked stone he received from the busty elf. He discovers that the object was an evolutionary part of a terrible monster. Our boy is in shock at that. The blonde garden dwarf asks what that look on Gate's face is, and he just tells him to prepare for combat. The little guy didn't know the whereabouts of the sleepy old man. There was no one to handle the job. It was just them. Our girl stood before her superiors and asks who they are. The rookie just remembers the rule and instruction manual and says their names. The show-off elf ends up questioning the rookie's attire and the reason for all of it. Suddenly, the door opens and it's Gate. He talks about the terrible creatures that are on their way. The two veterans stare at our boy without understanding what is happening, and the muscle man, looking like a tough guy, immediately delivers a slap. The provocative healer soon interferes with everything and lets the boy speak. Our protagonist reveals the dangers of that purple stone. The superiors end up laughing in his face, not believing him. The boy explains the dangers of that object, but in a mocking tone, the healer talks about how much of a womanizer Gate is. We see Diet being kicked out of the cabin, and they tell him to just go do his mediocre job. The boy stays there fallen in a position of defeat. Meanwhile, the sleepy old man remained in the dream world. The bro worries about the little time left. That dawn, on the wall's watchtower, the soldier spots something terrible. His friend even thinks it's a joke, when right behind him a hideous creature appears. The soldier can't believe what he is seeing and is shitting his pants with fear. It was an unstable truce after 30 years of war, where the bloodstains disappeared and the swords were set aside. We then see that there were many deserting and missing soldiers. What had happened is that the barrier was breached by the demons. Meanwhile, everyone in the camp was desperate about those demons. No one could understand how those creatures got past the barriers. Wurgel's aura was so absurd that the soldiers in its presence shit their clothes. The demon beats the crap out of several soldiers until our boy arrives at the battle. It seems that his strikes have no effect on the creature. The boy is frightened by the size of that demon's power. It wasn't a dream. It was all nothing but the harsh reality. We see the dark elf arriving and questioning if all that is real. Everyone there begins to tremble with fear of that situation. Our rookie and the dark elf seem to shake like leaves. The situation was not good at all. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Uldring questions the whereabouts of those bastards and the training of those soldiers. The big problem with that creature was its ability to spread a toxic swamp on the land, turning the entire territory demonic. The Dark Elf immediately asks the rookie to start the incantation and concentrate. Then, the Whale Elf appears on his horse. The Blonde Elf asks the Tub of Lard to get out of the way because he is being a hindrance. Amidst all that chaos, our rookie was disappointed in herself because even the immense elf was fighting and she was there trembling with fear. Everyone aligns in their formation. The boy has the strategy of killing the creature before the swamp spreads. He charges at the creature and begins to deliver several strikes, but to no avail, the creature blocks all of them. The demon strikes back, throwing him far away. Diet realizes that it is a survival instinct in the creature, protecting its vital points because if he just had one more swordsman colleague, the situation could be different. Then, the Dark Elf uses his magic to trap the creature. All the subordinates demand orders from Uldring, and he remembers that he is the highest rank on the battlefield. The Dark Elf goes crazy and passes all the orders to his subordinates. Everyone attacks together to neutralize the creature. The Dark Elf thinks about the buffs and that he might have made a mistake. The boy, exuding an aura, waits for the perfect moment. The Black Mage complains about his delay. The warrior advances, promising to end all that, and, with a devastating slash, tears off the demon's head. His colleagues are impressed by all that skill. Finally, that terrible creature had met its end, when suddenly a loud noise is heard and the arrival of another demon, Grotan, and his minions. Then, the little fox climbs the fortress of the White Island. Its little mascot had brought a letter speaking about the demon invasion. The slicked-back hair elf cannot believe what she is reading and runs to notify her superiors. Arriving at the high-ranking room, she realizes that things are already not very good, because the crystal ball was not working correctly. The high-ranking old man begins to put the pieces together and foresee what was going to happen, and from the traces of the crystal order, things were quite sour. The old superiors question about the blackout and the advance of the troops. The hairy old man is indignant because they were there to kill the creatures and not provoke them. The old men start outlining a strategy, and the bald old man asks for Rebecca's opinion. Returning to the battlefield, the shorty questions the boy about having disobeyed the chain of command. However, everything is a matter of emergency. The swamp was spreading, and it was a matter of time until demons started sprouting. There was a plan which was to infiltrate the Bloodlands and assassinate the host's body, because that way all the mental sharing would be annihilated. The little blonde is in doubt about what to do, and the answer that comes is just to advance. Gate from afar observes that the Great Blackout is over. The precedents were not good at all. There were only two options: kill or die. Joga, the knight, arrives and doesn't understand what is happening. He sees the fat elf and asks him to die soon or go to the hospital. The healer and the muscle man remained without any reaction. It even looked like they were on vacation. From afar, the Dark Elf observes the two superiors not caring about anything that was happening. The old man starts talking a bunch of nonsense as if he had done something, but the boy still had that strange feeling of restlessness. Moya ends up writing a letter distorting everything that had happened that night and coming out in a very good situation. The healer just looks with a look of contempt at Gate and his group, mocks the true heroes, and tells them to go wash the clothes. Gate tries to explain the situation and why he broke the chain of command. We see the muscleman treat the boy with total contempt and arrogance. Jera doesn't even want to know and just ends up ignoring the whole situation. Our protagonist, with a look of fury, thinks that his superiors have lost their minds and that someone really should have died. Joga is scared by his colleague's reaction. Soon everyone is called to go to the training courtyard. Asen and Jera continue to think they are at a summer camp. Moya reveals that the strategy is for the Transcendents, with their Deka weapons, to infiltrate the swamp and eliminate the host Grotan. The boy gets worried, as this mission would be almost a suicide. The old geezer gets pissed off with Geit's words. The rookie just observes the boy's courage. Our protagonist asks for an all-out advance. The old man doesn't give a fuck about the boy's opinion, he just trusts the Transcendents. The order was clear. At dawn, he would be sent to the operation. Every second counts, and the evolved demons will cross the barriers this very day. Suddenly, the boy observes a feather falling from the sky. It was Captain Rebecca. The winged elf arrives landing and places her hand on the boy's shoulder. The two exchange glances, and the boy does not understand what is happening. Suddenly, a troop of winged elves arrives. The old man is left open-mouthed with the captain's sudden arrival, and she questions him about that report. The old man plays dumb trying to explain, but is soon surprised with a finger to the mouth and then a kick in the balls. The winged one questions him about the distorted crap he had written in the report. The tower ahead was not just for decoration, it was a powerful observation tool. Rebecca actually knew what was happening there and who the true heroes of the story were. The blind rooster and the other superiors are scared by all that information. The captain orders the entire company to prepare, because from that exact moment, the incursion would begin. The demons are connected by a shared consciousness, so the inferior entities always obey the main brain. All this information was stored in a demonic locker room because the creatures declared the restart of the war. The two old men look at the orb and say they cannot waste time. The captain agrees. There won't be another chance. Back at the camp, the green-haired elf asked for reinforcements. However, there is no way to wait, because there is no time. Meanwhile, the dark elf was sad, because he wanted a vacation. There is a great whispering among the crowd, because everyone does not know what is happening there. Meanwhile, the swamp was spreading into the Federation zone. The old man gives orders for everyone to protect themselves when, suddenly, a creature attacks them coming out of the swamp. Soon, the captain gives the orders to stay in formation. Rebecca, in a leap, cuts the demon's nose and shouts to her company that the weak point is the nose. Everyone quickly follows her orders, and the creatures become disoriented. More demons appear from the swamp. The captain, with a look of despair, realized the creature's strategy. The harpy platoon attacks the demon, and the archers shoot their arrows at the other monster. The front line was already collapsing. The demon applies a devastating strike, and then attacks the dark elf, who is left without reaction. Gate saves his friend by stepping in front of the strike, takes care of the demon, and asks his friend to take care of something else. The dark elf runs and does what his friend asked. Aldring thinks how suicidal the mission was for his three friends and summons his magic. The boy realizes that he is getting good at this and that there are patterns in the creature's attacks. Our protagonist advances and with a single strike tears off the demon's head. Rebecca and her companion, in a devastating strike, tear off the head of another creature. The monsters had been eliminated. The rookie doesn't understand why she can't do anything. The captain says that beyond the black barrier is demon territory, and Swan becomes sad because she can't act. The healer worries about scars, and the captain asks Jera to heal her companions. The muscleman is attacked by a creature, and with just a jab, crumbles the monster. With arrogance, the buff guy tells his subordinates not to let the creatures touch him. Rebecca realizes that the situation is not good, but the key to victory is in the hands of the Transcendents. They arrive at the Bloodland and are already welcomed by demons. The captain asks the mages to deploy the magic of the World Tree. The magic is deployed as a barrier, and the creatures cannot get close. She tells the boy that it won't hold for long. The harpy shouts for everyone to support the Transcendents. Our heroes enter the cave, and soon the Deca weapons activate a protection magic. The bro says that the light of the weapons will guide the way. The rookie and the shorty just agree. The boy thinks that either way he needs to finish this. The situation was complicated, however our heroes proceeded in the shadows. The dwarf asks why there are no demons there. That space belonged to the bodiless host, and not even an ant could step in there without permission. So most of those creatures stayed alone in the darkness. The group comes face to face with a terrible creature. The cowardly shorty talks about the creature's stature. The demon was giant and everyone is in shock at that monster. The demon soon wastes no time and uses its attack, but our protagonist, using his sword, defends himself. The rookie and the pygmy are in shock at the situation. Our protagonist tries to compose himself and not lose control. The demon just shouts that everyone will die and launches a gust of wind. Everyone tries to defend themselves but end up getting very bad symptoms. Gate shouts for his colleagues to stop falling asleep at the switch. The creature launches a terrifying strike. The boy dodges and protects his companions, complaining that his friends are nothing but dead weight. Our prota remembers the useless words of the drooling old man because they made no sense at all and just focuses on killing the creature. He advances forward with all his fury, dodging the creature's attack and landing a devastating strike, but we see that the strike had no effect on the demon. The boy is hit and flies far into the rocks, and the damage the creature caused to the swordsman was terrible. He ends up seeing a sword that belonged to one of his friends and realizes that the creature had killed one of his colleagues. It was all a big lie, and the demon was already well trained with that type of combat. That transcendent squad was nothing but a punching bag for the monster. The creature throws rocks towards the squad, is amazed at the swordsman's resistance and steps on him like a bug. His companions just watch their friend being crushed. Then, the rookie, for the first time, casts her magic and traps the creature. She realizes that her great difficulty in casting her spells was fear. The shorty and the elf mage just accept their fate. The creature advances on them, and once again, the boy ends up saving his friends. The demon attacks the boy with a headbutt, throwing him far. He realizes that the monster's skin is made of stone. Our protagonist knows that the chances are minimal and asks his team if that will be their tomb. If his team continued acting that way, everyone would be extinct, so he asked them to focus only on the main objective of defeating that demon. Our protagonist's simple words rekindle Swan's flame. She remembers and casts the correct spell, imprisoning the creature. Even Gate doesn't understand how a brute like that can move that way. The rookie outlines the strategy, asks the shorty to execute the plan, and applies a buff on the demon. The creature advances, the pygmy does what she asks and buffs the creature. With the combination of attacks, the creature jumps far and falls on its head. The mage takes the chance and casts her necromancy magic. The boy just watches what happens. The mage remembers the swordsman's training when she had just arrived at the camp and asks the boy to execute stance 1. Our protagonist raises his sword. The little one exhausts his remaining mana, buffing the boy with more strength. Gate takes back the words he had spoken, admits that his friends are true Class A, and, with a devastating strike, tears off the creature's head. We see our hero decapitating the creature, and our heroes can't seem to believe they succeeded. Gate notices something, quickly grabs his knife and tears off a special part of the creature. Our hero needs to eat that piece of rotten meat, and the rookie doesn't feel well with that situation. The swordsman eats all the meat and feels that it's not just digestion, a fusion and an increase in power occur. The boy begins to brandish his sword and his friends are impressed by it because the proteins present in the monster's meat increased his strength. That information is not present in the demonic locker room. The only ones who know are that group of transcendents, and the bond between them has become stronger. The swordsman concludes that the reward is received by fulfilling the parts wave. Therefore, that information obtained by killing demons will be shared only within that squad. Our protagonist says that this is their little secret, and the mage admires the boy for his strength and wisdom. The bloodbath that occurs on the battlefields always ends up belonging to those who hide behind desks. The boy, from the beginning, always knew about the cowardice of the chain of command, and that true heroes always disappeared silently. We see the old man being attacked by a creature. He thinks he is going to die right there. The old man remembers that he was seen as a bad example and just accepts his fate. Suddenly, the creature crumbles to dust. Everyone on the battlefield can't believe what is happening. Rebecca asks for the barriers to be lowered. The demonic swamp gradually dissolves. The harpy realizes that there is no more danger nearby, and suddenly, in the middle of the darkness, our heroes appear. The captain looks surprised by that and remembers how fearless that squad was in the first attack. She smiles, relieved with the success of those kids, and the archer runs to give Gate a hug. The dark elf is surprised with their result and gets his ear pulled by the captain because he was screwing up. The healer and the muscleman, as always, are bitter. Gate just watches because they talk a lot and do nothing. The penny hadn't dropped for those two because the Federation was in a very delicate situation. We see the old man and his subordinates repairing the wall. The results of that battle left dead and wounded, and the archer secures the area. The conquest of the Bloodland doesn't seem to be the end. Moya calls Asen because he needs help reinforcing the wall. The old man, as always, talks a lot and does nothing. Our protagonist lifts those stones as if they were styrofoam. The old man and the knight can't believe what they are seeing. The stones seem to weigh nothing. It was very easy to carry them. The old man and the muscle men continue in disbelief, and the boy realizes how much the territory had changed. Suddenly, the messenger from headquarters arrives. We see the grumpy old man questioning the messenger, who brought the news that another weapon had been revealed. Everyone there is surprised, but our boy just observes with no interest at all. The messenger reports that the Deka Gauntlet Tear of Fury had appeared and was distributed to a giant. The elderly man just agrees with that. From afar, everyone hears a macabre laugh. It was the knights, because he could hardly wait for that moment. We see everyone gathered, and Gate was yelling at the recruits. Some of them stood out in the crowd, but the issue was that all those titles in real combat were useless. The question was why our heroes were in a recruitment camp instead of the front line. The shorty couldn't understand what he was doing there. The scene cuts, and we see why Gate is in that camp. We see the old man, as always, trying to ease his side. The boy understands what that elderly man wants and says goodbye to his friends. Our protagonist tells the shorty to practice what he had taught. He was reading the paper when the muscular giant arrives, saying that due to some situations the protocol should be broken, because the one who will be recruited will become a transcendent. Gate is surprised by his colleague's speech, but little did he know that the giant had practiced a lot. Meanwhile, Dranen, the head chef, couldn't stand cooking for those brutes anymore and lived under a regular labor regime. In the recruitment camp, the rookies observed the exam results. There were two giants who stood out, Titan and Golier. Everyone was gathered when someone calls the two giants. Golier doesn't like being mentioned along with her colleague. Titan comes to greet his partner. The two engage in a hand-to-hand bout, and the female Titan seems unable to handle the play. Suddenly, another colleague appears to break the tension, but a real competitive atmosphere was going on, and the giant turns his back and walks away. Baba talks about his companion's attitudes, which were not welcoming at all, and the two start being friends. The recruit continues making jokes, and the giant couldn't stand that chatter anymore. Gate is impressed how no one asked for a change of clothes. The fitting assistant explains to him that Moai is also from the giant clan, so things get easier. Since humans and dwarves are considered non-essential forces, there is always a lack of clothing sizes for them. Night arrives at the camp and everyone is sleeping. Everything seemed very tight. The talkative one ends up telling how his mother managed to fall asleep, and everyone there couldn't stand his stories anymore. Suddenly, someone calls for Titan, and the giant quickly gets up. The female giant ends up getting jealous. Arriving in the room, he bumps into the old man, who says that there he is nothing more than just a recruit. The old man gives the news that the recruit is the great chosen one. Moai and Asen talk about the boy's qualities. That veteran could hardly wait for the time to make the rookie's life a living hell. The soldiers complain about escorting the recruit at that time of night, and they arrive at the location asking recruit number 1 to get up. He was standing there drinking his coffee. The soldiers don't understand what is happening there. The recruit, whispering, calls those soldiers losers. The subordinates find that a lack of respect, but Titan says he didn't say anything, and that they misunderstood. Those soldiers didn't want to hear it, they wanted a fight. Titan gets up from the table and says he didn't say a fucking thing, and the soldiers become afraid of the situation. The giant then says, "They are fucked." We see Titan saying that those soldiers are nothing but a piece of shit. The soldiers try to contest, but are silenced by force. The brute lifts them both as if it were nothing. He talks about how fed up he was with all that nonsense, throws the soldiers against the wall, and ends up teaching those shits a lesson. The next morning, the soldiers report what had happened to the old man, but the elderly man doesn't believe those subordinates. Giants were an extremely versatile race in the army. From afar, Titan listened to everything that happened in the cabin. Baba realizes that his friend is plotting something, and the giant just says that things are going to heat up. While the shorty was talking about his training, the mage didn't even hear what he was saying. The starving giant ends up bumping his head on the gate. Suddenly, Asen arrives skipping the food line, and the veteran immediately takes the best part of the meal. Our boy asks why the giants had cobwebs on their heads. He says that due to his size, it gets hard to get rid of those things. Gate says that all that size must have a reason. Meanwhile, the other giants in the cafeteria were talking about Gate's victory, and don't understand how he is still just a veteran officer. He was just enjoying his meal. The recruits were only thinking about salary and their leaves. Suddenly, Titan arrives and throws a tray of food on the table, asking those recruits to solve that. The two just look on without understanding, while their opponent, from afar, sees his ridiculous attitude. Baba gathers his things and says he prefers peace. Goliath notices a strange accent on that giant. In the field, the recruits practiced planting pillars. The orders were to throw and hit the face carved in the stone. Titan had already thrown and hit. The first recruit throws and fails to hit. Recruit number 8 throws and hits dead on, leaving everyone impressed with her. From afar, Titan watches everything that happens. Goliath asks Baba about his accent, and he says he is from the countryside, which is why she thought it was sexy. She asks about a plague that is advancing over that territory, but her clan is immune to the effects of that disease. Another recruit mentions that there are no more humans in that region, and asks if there are still many giants in the area. Baba answers that there are still a few there. It was recruit Baba's turn. He ends up using too much force, and the stone spear goes far away. The veteran gets pissed at him. The crowd questions that only Titan and Goliath hit the target. Titan, with a mocking look, listens to his companion's comments. The old man arrives and asks recruit Baba to sing a song. Everyone starts booing him, and Titan finds all of it very pathetic. We see soldiers complaining about the old man's attitudes, when Titan suddenly appears watching those soldiers. The brute questions them about being snitches, and the soldiers don't like that. Our hero walks with his backpack of knickknacks. Gate notices something and ends up seeing what is happening in that alley. The two soldiers being used as punching bags. Titan remembers the conversation in the cafeteria about our protagonist, and the recruit looks at him with a very strange face. The boy just asks what they are doing there. Those soldiers ask for help, but the giant pretends he doesn't know what is happening. That brute gets up and walks towards our hero. He greets the boy and does the handshake trick to test his power. Titan doesn't seem to understand what is happening and why the human isn't reacting, while the boy just doesn't understand what the giant is doing. Gate realizes the recruit's true intention. Our boy then squeezes Titan's hand, and the giant almost shits his pants. Our hero realizes the giant's trickery and squeezes the brute's hand, who almost shits his pants again. Titan cannot understand what was up with that bro and falls to his knees. With irony, Gate asks him to return to his duty and tells the giant to stop acting like a badass. Stop being a jerk." That kind of behavior made Gate remember other fools. Our boy scolds the giant, saying he is nothing but a little shit. Diet leaves a warning that if it happens again, things will get crazy. The soldiers just watch the giant get scolded. Meanwhile, in the camp, everyone was organizing, and the captain ends up hearing a distant howl. We then see the giants in the trench arena. His companions ask Titan what was happening. The female giant observes and says she will crush Titan. The veteran announces the next trench fight. It was Mama's boy giant versus the dwarf among the giants. The dwarf giant maps out his strategy and, with just one strike using his technique, throws Baba out. The small giant just looks on without understanding. Everyone boos Mama's boy giant, but he doesn't care. The winning giant boasts, and Baba can hardly wait for the next fight that will occur. Finally, the great fight begins between Titan and Goliath. Titan already wants to take out his anger on his companion, but she won't let it slide. Memories of the defeat still haunt Titan. The female giant is prepared for combat. The two advance, and Titan seems to be doing well in the fight, but he ends up missing his strike and is taken to the ground by the giant. Everyone is impressed by her capacity, and the giant realizes that things won't be easy. In an instant, Titan ends up lifting her, and everyone is impressed by the brute's strength. But, with a simple slip-up by him, she applies a strike to his neck and ends up grabbing him from behind. He applies a back throw and manages to get out of that situation. He lands a strike. The giant girl manages to stop his attack, and he ends up taking a huge kick to the ribs and is thrown far away. He charges forward quickly, and the two are locked there, struggling for strength. Their companions are impressed by their capacity. The fight was a true spectacle. Both had their skill there. One was strength, and the other technique. The fight had already lasted hours, and the giant was already exhausted. Titan tells her to stop complaining and surrender, but the female giant was a tough nut to crack. The veteran watches the hourglass, and time runs out. But for the brute, it wasn't enough, and he grabs Goliath by the neck. The veteran and his companions are frightened by the situation. The giant says that it is already over, but Titan tells her to shut up and die. Suddenly, he hears a voice. Our hero arrives to put an end to the joke, and only then does the brute stop the fight. Asen realizes that the giant did not obey his orders, he only obeyed Gate. Titan does not accept that, and wishes for revenge when he gets a Deca weapon. That clash between the two giants remained unresolved, and soon the morning of the weapon summoning ceremony day arrived. Everyone returned their identification tags. Mama's boy giant realized how fast time passes for him, and for the female giant it seems like the first day was yesterday. According to Baba, the scores favored his friend, but she still had some doubts about the result. Everyone awaited the grand result, and the two giants managed to tie. The veteran tells the old man about the tie, as that was the first time. Our boy observes and sees that those are just points, and that in the end, the one who ends up choosing is the weapon. We see everyone gathered at the red cloud summoning ground. The old man announces the two giants. The brute steps forward, wanting to be first. The giant tells him to just get a clue and snap out of his illusions. Gate asks the recruit to channel his energy. Titan, thirsty for power, wanted to finally summon a damn Deca weapon. He could hardly wait for the time to get that weapon and get his revenge. The arrogant one tries to pull the weapon with all his strength, but with all that strength, the weapon remained standing there. The veterans observe what happens. The giant was already on edge about it, and his companions are already starting to realize that the brute failed. He doesn't seem to understand that it is not his time. Gate asks the little shit to step away from the weapon. Everyone mocks him, as he had no qualification at all. It was the female giant's turn to try. Her friends don't understand, because even Goliath had failed in the mission to pull the weapon. When one of the soldiers reveals that one of the recruits had received a bonus upon killing a demon, we see that Baba had executed a creature with his stone spear. Our boy looks at the papers and says that number 15 also has the necessary requirements to summon the weapon. The old man says that the recruit is also qualified. The weapon's name was Furious Tear Gauntlet. His group doesn't believe that the weapon will accept Mama's boy. Baba stands before the legendary weapon, and our beloved giant doesn't know what is happening. On a cold and very snowy night, a child is abandoned on a house's doorstep. The child didn't cry and seemed happy. The boy didn't understand why the woman took such good care of him. The woman, even being so frail, always ended up protecting the boy, and even when cold, she always left the boy bundled up. The other children mocked his height, and he didn't feel included there. His dear mother was so fragile. He couldn't understand why that woman took him in and raised something like him. He questioned his mother, because he was a giant and she was a human. The rebellious boy often hurt his mother by saying horrible things, and even with her suffering all that curse because of him, he didn't understand. His dear mother was bedridden, as perhaps it was her last day. She just wished she had treated him better, and even so, she wanted to hear the giant call her mommy. Baba can't take it. His heart breaks. He falls into tears and cries out for his mother. The giant asks her not to go away. His mother says how good it was to hear his voice, and that the giant child's smile made her feel like she had the whole world. His mommy asks him not to cry when she leaves because he needs to keep smiling. She leaves a great piece of advice, that we smile because we are happy, and we become happy because we smile. Then, his mother asks him to promise that he will never stop smiling because she loves him. Baba thanks his mother and promises to smile every day whenever he thinks of her, and that in the next life she needs to be his mother again. He says goodbye at his mother's grave. In the recruit camp, his companions don't understand why he smiles so much. Baba replies that he doesn't smile because he feels good. He smiles so that he can feel good. Back at the weapon extraction, everyone there is impressed with what Baba just achieved because Mama's little boy just confirmed himself as another transcendent. Our hero talks to the animals about the next host and remembers that he had left a mission for the damned dwarf. Then, he starts mapping out his strategy to be up to par and rank up quickly. Baba is already with all the preparations completed. Gate says the carriage got a bit tight and asks them to go ahead. The rookie agrees with that, and the bro doesn't understand why the backpack was small on the giant. Night arrives and we see our hero's carriage. Our boy says the situation is not very good and asks them to rest a bit. The rookie says he isn't sleepy and has some questions about drafted troops from the giant clan, and why the human participated in the official training even though he wasn't a giant. Our hero argues to the giant that size doesn't matter. Gate says the marches are happening, but the command transition hasn't fully familiarized with the manual yet. And since they advance further every time, they stay far from the main base. So, until this war is over, neither the giant nor the human will return to the main base. The boy welcomes Transcendent Baba. Our giant just smiles and says he will do his best. Gate thinks it's good, because as we advance, the demons will get stronger, and the Transcendence Task Force will also get stronger. Our hero promises that all the spilled blood will never be in vain. We see dawn break, and that everyone there slept like a log. The shorty asks the giant to get his luggage. Baba realizes that the air in that demonic zone is horrible, but he needs to adapt. Transcendence Guide and Baba enter Groton Gop. We then see the Groton forward base. Baba sees if his veteran needs help with the clothes, but he just ignores him. He asks the mage where she is going, and she says she is going to the temporary quarters. The shorty wanted to ask a question and was making some strange movements. He says the synthesis is complete and asks the mage to check the mint aroma entry point. Our shorty says that with that magic, the common soldiers will become resistant to the swamp gas. He explains about the spell's algorithms and how the blue magic is based. The brood is touched on the shoulder by the immense elf. Nartz asks the giant to come with him and asks his fellow giant who he looks like. The fat guy starts vomiting a bunch of lies about the battle against the demon, keeps lying and talking a bunch of nonsense about his special existence. He starts asking some questions about the lunch password. The brute senses a terrible energy. From afar, the shorty was yelling and calling the giant. He said that Baba would be sent to do repairs on the fortress. The little guy asks him to memorize what's on the paper because there is a demand from the others, and explains about the dangers of the swamp. But being a transcendent, he possesses resistance. He points and asks the giant to join those along with the others. The knight and the dark elf were struggling to lift a stone block, but Baba arrives just holding one of those blocks on his shoulder. Our hero explains that the new recruit is from the giant race and is the new transcendent. He runs into Asen, who is not happy at all with the giant's smile, and asks Gate to take care of the rookie if he doesn't want to die. The veteran realizes that the weapon didn't end up choosing the one he intended and is in doubt about the human strength. Someone from the tower yells for them not to advance too much and to work carefully. The things hiding in the swamp cannot leave the zone because it's too dangerous. Our boy knows that the swamp territory is inhabited by a demonic host, and that the creatures seen among the gizzies are the main emitter of the swamp gas. The boy notices the rookie's doubt about the purple stones scattered over the camp, and explains that it was part of a demon's eye. Then the giant realizes that the horrible smell of that zone was due to the swamp. Baba is normally more sensitive to smells, but the swamp gas was even bearable. The basic function of a deca weapon was the purification of the air around its wielder. We see the mage meeting the healer. And as always, Jera has unbearable attitudes, as she had asked the mage to find her hair tie. The mage in despair offers the healer her own hair tie. Jera just throws the hair tie away, and the rookie mage gets very sad with that reaction. She questions the rookie why she didn't die in the blood zone, and Swan just apologizes to her. The envious healer does not like the mage's apologies, and our heroine gets a very bad expression. She asks the mage if that place was that difficult. Our rookie cannot say anything, and is questioned about the silence. Jera throws a hard slap on the rookie's face and, with a face of envy, ends up cursing her companion. The orb brought news from the administrative office. The announcement was about a meeting with the Transcendents. The blonde archer arrives to announce the meeting, and as always, the healer remained envious. The archer questions her about that, and she says she can handle it. She says the healer also picked on her, and our beloved thanks her for the concern. We see the company commander's office. The council talks about a terrible beast that attacks its enemies incessantly, and that on the day of the reversal, the creature exterminated 3 divisions with its cruelty. Meanwhile, the beasts lurk in the shadows, and everyone keeps listening attentively to the instructions. The captain makes it very clear that only the Transcendents can accomplish the mission. Our boy worries about reaching the necessary speed, because Baba's lack of experience will have to be compensated by the rest of the group. The boy promises to defeat the creature Haka with his own hands. We see Mama's boy giant eating his meal. He is impressed with the taste of the food, and the little one admires his palate. The boy jokes with the giant about thinking the demon's eye was a fruit. After a brief rest period, our hero begins to pass all the strategy to his companions. He recalls that, after the death of the main host, the rest of the creatures also vanished. This time it was a bit different because the demon was more complicated. He explains about killing Haka first, and then going after Raka and Jaka. That's why Gate trained his companions. The beloved still doubts her capability, and admires Baba because he is so calm in such a situation. The beloved asks the giant if something is bothering him. He gets a bit confused with the girl's question, thinking she is talking about the food. Gate asks the giant to stay a little longer, and the rest to go rest. Night falls over the camp. Rebecca is still thoughtful about the boy's request. Our hero says that the key piece of everything was her. The captain thinks that someone like him shouldn't end his career as a soldier. Suddenly, someone arrives at Rebecca's cabin, and she asks what happened. The boy warns that the swamp had already spread beyond the walls. The captain is in shock with the news. The creatures were causing damage to the structures, and they observe the demon responsible for all that. The soldier says that if it continues that way, the walls won't hold. The captain asks to assemble the troops. The soldier says the mucus the creatures spread is faster than usual, and that the conditions are no longer safe. Rebecca asks about the quantity of scarves for protection. We see the archer say the troops are ready. The captain questions the archer about not being affected by the gas, and she explains about a buff she received from the little one. Then, Morris arrives at the scene and passes the instructions about the block in the algorithm. The little one asks to cast an area buff and explains that magic will make them able to breathe. The superiors are impressed with the skill. Morris prepares his spell, Mint Breath, and the immediate effects reach the entire squad. That psychological relief of removing the respiratory restriction was enormous. The captain concentrates to elevate the combat spirit of the soldiers. Our hero praises the little one, as he thinks firstly of his superior. Rebecca takes flight and shouts to the troop that the gas has no more effect on them, and that from that moment the gates will be opened. The strategy was to keep formation, and as soon as they advance, concentrate the fire. And as soon as the demons step in, they will all be killed. Everyone gets ready for combat, and the main creature soon appears with its subordinates. Rebecca flies and encourages her companions. Everyone was prepared for the gate opening. From behind that gate were several demons, and alongside was the demon responsible for that. The creatures begin to invade the camp. The knights stop the advance of the demons, and the harpies observe everything. Everything goes according to Rebecca's plan. The archer shoots a rain of arrows, and one of the creatures advances against her, but she strikes back with her bow. Rebecca hits the creatures with her sword, observes the front line, and realizes that the demons don't stop trying. So, she decides to call our heroes. The Transcendent squad advances and attacks the creatures. Our hero and the giant will clear the way for their friends. Gate tells his friends that the priority is the main demon. Our hero's advance moves forward, and he asks his friends to focus on Haka. The archer observes the Transcendents from afar, and Swan is impressed with Baba. Our heroes advance towards the creature, and the monster stares intently at the boy. Suddenly, 2 other creatures attack him, and he realizes things won't be easy. The demon near our heroes was a colossus. The mage casts her grab magic, but the demon quickly dodges. Baba realizes one is coming towards him and executes an attack. The boy is surprised with the giant. It was the perfect combination of buffs. The little one cast his support spells on his colleague, and Baba is impressed with those magics. He advances on the creature and executes a strike, but the monster dodges and appears behind his back. Our boy tries to fight back and realizes it's impossible to hit the creature. The speed difference between the two was absurd. He hits the creature, but the demon catches the attack with its mouth, and soon, our boy is thrown against the mountain. Haka advances towards the swordsman and lands another strike. His colleagues worry about him, but he asks them not to worry. The creatures advance on the mage and the shorty. Swan casts a spell against the monsters, but the creatures are too fast. She realizes the magics can't keep up with the speed, and once again the creatures advance against them, but the tank arrives to protect them. The mage remembers the dark elf's advice about confusion magic on creatures. Baba holds the two demons by the mouth. Our girl asks the little one to trust her, and asks to silence them completely. Only then would her plan work. The garden dwarf executes his plan, and the two cast the magic on the creatures. The gnome explains that body strengthening spells must be short, because the body can't handle it, but metal can handle it for longer. The protagonist thinks to himself that Morris needs to take Swan and Baba to deal with Jaka and Raka, because otherwise the two would become dependent and lose mobility. He tells the gnome to buff the blade this time, which scares him. He asks if the warrior could handle it, but the protagonist says he is important for that battle, so he should save mana. He says that while having the blade buff, it would be enough. Now, amidst the combat, he confronts the beast. Returning to the cold, they defended themselves from the attacks. Suddenly, silence begins, which leaves everyone confused, but it is revealed they pulled off a spell. He says not to waste time with that and cast the magic already. The elf then pays attention and begins to cast magic while drawing a serpent's tongue on her staff, chanting various incantations to control the beasts that were attacking and make them fight each other. This leaves everyone surprised with Swan's performance. The warrior asks for excuse, grabs the dwarf by the clothes saying they must follow the plan, and looks at a figure in the sky, which was the captain. Right after, he throws the dwarf. She thinks to herself about the help that was requested to invade the amplification tower, which was accessible only by flight, being the only one capable of going through it. Making her serious upon remembering what the protagonist said, she tells the dwarf that when he enters the turbulence, he won't speak because of the noise and that he should just follow the plan. This makes her remember the meeting of the four, where the protagonist said that demons have a shared collective consciousness, so when demons communicate, they whistle. They should strengthen cohesion and start howling. They should use this instinct to stop the absurdly fast Haka. The gnome says he has something to report. Even if he used all the buffs, his whistle would not surpass 1 Pascal, and the manual said that high-level demons only react to 10 Pascals or more. Our hero says that was already enough. 1 Pascal is possible now in the amplification tower, where all surrounding noises are amplified tenfold, creating a deafening noise. The captain was advancing with her eyes barely open, then throws Morris and says she would go get him when the whistle ended. He confirms, thinking he just needs to wait for her to cross the amplification zone to end it all at once. Right after, he lets out a powerful whistle that echoes everywhere, reaching the demons and making them freeze and start to howl. Everyone charges into combat, delivering various strikes against the demons. The elf archer thinks he succeeded after remembering all his training. Meanwhile, the wolf demon looked up. The protagonist thinks to himself that it worked and starts preparing an attack, charging forward while remembering the past. The gnome himself said that if some time passes, the demons come back to their senses. So, they only had one chance while in the present, his sword aims at the demon wolf.